Recording, and I'm going to share my screen. Sorry. मेरो स्क्रिन देख्दै हुनुहुन्छ? Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, sabajana, based on whichever part of the world you're joining us from. Welcome. Hamro Nepal Mental Health Research Webinar Series ko 11th webinar ma. As you can see on your screen, as a hamro webinar ko topic cha Together but Alone, the impact of men's migration on the mental health of their wives in rural Nepal. Hamro speaker Dr. Sauharda Rai hununcha, अनि Professor Brandon Court जो George Washington University बाट हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँले हाम्रो स्पिकरलाई introduce गराउनु हुनेछ. तर just before that, I'm just going to cover a couple of things that we should all be mindful of हाम्रो यो webinar को duration मा. First things first, हाम्रो यो webinar recorded हुन्छ. Recording हुन सुरु पनि भइसकेको छ. हामीले यो webinar record गर्नुको intention चाहिँ तपाईहरुलाई यो webinar को recording र presentation को slides हरु हामीले webinar पछि provide गर्छौं, so that you can always come back to it. If there's anything that's interesting to you, you can dissect the webinar further and learn more from it. So त्यो recording को लागि चाहिँ हामीलाई तपाईहरुले permission दिनुहुन्छ भनेर हामी विश्वास गर्छौं. Everybody, like I just said, हाम्रो सबैजनाले webinar सकेपछि webinar को materials हरु पाउनुहुन्छ. हाम्रो basic structure of the webinar चाहिँ कस्तो हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि अब अहिले we will take around like 5 to 7 minutes यो केही कुराहरु गर्नु अनि हाम्रो speaker को introduction गर्नुको लागि. त्यसपछि we will have around 15 minutes हाम्रो presentation को लागि हामी speaker लाई hand over गर्छौं. त्यसपछि roughly 10 to 15 minutes चाहिँ questions which can be based on the हामी यो presentation को बारेमा उहाँको experiences को बारेमा उहाँलाई questions हरु सोध्न सक्छौं र त्यसपछि चाहिँ हाम्रो speaker ले हामीलाई केही discussion questions हरु provide गर्नु भएको छ. त्यसको लागि चाहिँ हामी breakout rooms हरुमा गएर breakout rooms मा त्यो discussion questions हरुलाई अझ in depth मा कुरा गर्छौं, so that we can understand the topic more, we can understand this research more and put forth हाम्रो यो research को बारेमा कुराकानीहरु. And to do that 10-15 minutes को breakout session पछि चाहिँ for the last 5 minutes of the webinar हामी हाम्रो breakout rooms बाट फिर्ता will come back to this main room जहाँ सबैजना हाम्रो co-discussantहरु co-moderators र discussantहरु हुनुहुन्छ. उहाँहरुले त्यो webinar को उहाँहरुको discussion को main points हरु चाहिँ हामीलाई भन्नुहुन्छ. Talking about हाम्रो co-moderators हरु, हाम्रो आज सुजैन मान महर्जन, उहाँ research coordinator हुनुहुन्छ धुलिखेल hospital काठमाडौँ university र विनिता आचार्य उहाँ TPO मा junior research officer को रूपमा काम गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ. उहाँहरुले हामीलाई question answer session मा पनि co-moderation गर्न help गर्नुहुन्छ र उहाँहरु हाम्रो discussion group को co-discussants हरु पनि हुनुहुन्छ. Basically तपाईहरुले question answers हरु राख्नुको लागि हाम्रो chat feature use गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ र साथसाथै हाम्रो speaker ले आफ्नो presentation सक्नु भएपछि hand raise गरेर जुन चाहिँ हाम्रो Zoom ले हामीलाई enable गरेको छ hand raise गरेर पनि questions हरु सोध्न सक्नुहुन्छ. हामी speaker लाई interrupt चाहिँ गर्दैनौं. Whether chat को means बाट or hand raise गरेर you're free to ask questions once we've said that the floor is open for discussion. Quickly going into Hamro future events, as you know, we have monthly webinars, third week of every month. June ma we took a month off, so you might be wondering June ko lagi kina mail aena bhanera. हामीले May को webinar मा भनेको थियौं that we're off for a month on June and we're back with fresh minds and fresh topics for you for the rest of the year. Like we said, you don't have to keep track of it किनकि invitation emails हरु अनि हाम्रो Twitter page अनि Facebook page मा हामीले हाम्रो upcoming events हरुको बारेमा कुराकानी गर्छौं. Talking about upcoming events, we already have something that could be of interest to the people who are joining us today. हामीले August 29 देखि September 2 को लागि एउटा global mental health short course जसको topic तपाईको अगाडि छ screen, global mental health assessment and measurement, best practices and new directions भनेर एउटा course organize गरेको छौं, which is being implemented by TPO Nepal in collaboration with Tribhuvan University Department of Psychiatry, Institute of Medicine and जर्ज वाशिङटन युनिभर्सिटी। हाम्रो यो कोर्स अफ द वेबिनारमा मैले यसको लागि कल फर एप्लिकेसन पनि हाम्रो च्याटमा पुटअप गर्छु, त्यो चाहिँ प्लिज फिल गरिदिनु होला। त्यो सँगसँगै तपाईँहरूको लागि अर्को एउटा हाम्रो रिक्वेस्ट, हाम्रो फिडब्याक फर्म हुन्छ। त्यो फिडब्याक फर्म इज बेसिकली सो द्याट वी क्यान मेक आवर वेबिनार्स बेटर। त्यो फिडब्याक फर्म पनि मैले च्याटमा हालिदिन्छु र तपाईँहरूले वेबिनारको मटेरियलसँग त्यो फिडब्याक फर्म पनि पाउनुहुनेछ। त्यो पनि प्लिज फिलअप गरिदिनु होला। साथसाथै केही गरी च्याटमा राख्न छुट्यो भने, च्याटबाट तपाईँहरूले लिन छुट्यो भने ग्लोबल मेन्टल हेल्थ सर्ट कोर्सको पनि हाम्रो ट्विटर पेज, फेसबुक पेजमा त्यसको बारेमा डिटेल्सहरू छ। तपाईँहरू के त्यसमा एलिजिबल हुनुहुन्छ कि तपाईँको एलिजिबिलिटी क्राइटेरिया हेरेर एप्लिकेसन चाहिँ एउटा गर्नुपर्ने हुन्छ। एप्लिकेसनको डेट्सहरू, डेडलाइन्सहरू पनि त्यसमा छ। त्यसमा चाहिँ प्लिज विल एन्करेज यु टु टेक अ लुक एट इट। एन्ड विथ द्याट over to you, Brandon. हाम्रो स्पिकरलाई इन्ट्रोड्युस गरिदिनुहोस् न।
Hasta Ritika ji, Sabailai Namaste. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce for today's webinar Dr. Soharda Rai, who is a research scientist at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Dr. Rai previously worked for TPO Nepal and the Duke Global Health Institute, and he recently received his PhD from the University of Washington in Seattle. His research focuses on mental health stigma, capacity building, and the psychosocial impact of conflict and migration in low-resource settings. He uses both quantitative and qualitative methods and is interested in the interdisciplinary approach of collaborating theories and methods from social sciences, global health, and anthropology in his work. He has a decade of experience working in mental health research and intervention in Nepal, Ethiopia, South Africa, the US, and is just about to initiate a new project in Uganda. And he's taught a range of courses on global health and research methods. And I can just say personally, it's an absolute pleasure working with Soharda. And I'm very excited for him to have the opportunity to share with you all his really incredible work done with migrant populations in southern Nepal. Over to you, Soharda.
Thanks, Brandon. So let me start by sharing my screen first. Can everyone see my screen?
Dekhiन्छ Soharda.
Thank
you. Clear.
All right. So before I start, I just wanted to make sure that my way of presentation, like it's kind of, I want to do this in Nepali, but I can see that there are some non-Nepali speakers. So I'll try to do like hybrid. I don't know what that would be, but please try to cope with it up in here. And also just wanted to warn all of you beforehand that right now I'm severely jet lagged. So if my train of thoughts doesn't come together, hopefully so please understand. Anyways, like getting back to the core of presentation, Brandon le मलाई introduce गरिसक्नु भएको छ, त्यही कारण फेरि पनि introduction चाहिन्छ जस्तो चाहिँ मलाई लागेन, but whoever are regular in the webinar, कतिजनाले मलाई पहिला पनि देखिसक्नु भएको छ, मैले रितिका अनि टिमलाई टाइममा चाहिँ वेबिनार मोडरेट गर्नलाई, फ्यासिलिटेट गर्नलाई चाहिँ हेल्प गरिरहेको हुन्छु र आज चाहिँ म चाहिँ स्पिकरको रूपमा चाहिँ आइरहेको छु। सो आज चाहिँ मेरो प्रेजेन्टेसनको टाइटल चाहिँ टुगेदर बट अलोन, द इफेक्ट अफ मेन्स माइग्रेसन अन मेन्टल हेल्थ अफ देयर वाइफ्स इन रुरल नेपाल। सो विगतको लास्ट 4 इयर्समा चाहिँ मैले यो लेबर माइग्रेसन अथवा यो वैदेशिक रोजगारमा जानुहुने व्यक्तिहरूको परिवारमा चाहिँ के कस्तो मानसिक असर पर्यो भनेर चाहिँ अनुसन्धान गरिरहेको छु र आज गर्ने प्रेजेन्टेसन चाहिँ इट्स अ पार्ट अफ इट। सो it's going to be something that I've been working since the last 4 years, and then hopefully it will be interesting, and then we can lead to some meaningful and interesting discussion. All right, so let's go to the outline of the presentation. First, I will go with a quick overview of labor migration in Nepal, and then I'll be talking about my methods and then my 3 research questions. So the whole study is based on 3 major research questions that I've divided into 3 papers. So I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about its underlying hypothesis, and then we'll also be talking about the key results that I got through my analysis. And then recommendations ko barema kura garchu, and then we'll have a short छोटो question and answer, and then हामी चाहिँ ग्रुपमा डिभाइड भएर चाहिँ we'll have some group discussion. So that's going to be the overall outline of my presentation of here. So let's start with labor migration in Nepal and overview. मलाई चाहिँ के लाग्छ भन्ने यहाँ आउनुभएका धेरैजनालाई चाहिँ नेपालको कन्टेक्स्टमा चाहिँ लेबर माइग्रेसनको इम्प्याक्ट सोसाइटीमा अथवा मेन्टल हेल्थमा कस्तो छ भनेर चाहिँ धेरैजनाले चाहिँ आई थिङ्क थाहा छ होला जस्तो भनेर चाहिँ म अज्युम गर्छु। यो फोटो चाहिँ मैले त्रिभुवन इन्टरनेसनल एयरपोर्टको लिएको हो। यो दुईटा फोटो चाहिँ मैले आफैले लिएको अनि माथि चाहिँ मैले इन्टरनेटबाट साभार गरेको हो। सो यस्तो पिक्चर्सहरू चाहिँ वी क्यान सी कमनली वेन वी आर गोइङ आउट थ्रु त्रिभुवन इन्टरनेसनल एयरपोर्ट। फ्यामिलिजहरू अथवा वाइफहरूले चाहिँ माइग्रेटिङ हस्बेन्डहरूलाई फेयरवेल दिइरहेको दृश्यहरू चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ धेरै देख्छौँ त्यो त्रिभुवन इन्टरनेसनल एयरपोर्टमा। अनि हामीले डेटा हेर्ने हो भने चाहिँ अन एन एभरेज एभ्री डे चाहिँ 1500 people leave the country for labor migration. And then I think one point that should be noted is that this is just documented labor migration. There are like I think thousands of undocumented labor migration as well. अनि जेन्डर पर्सपेक्टिभमा हेर्ने हो भने यो प्रोसेस चाहिँ इट्स भेरी हाइली जेन्डर्ड। डेटा हेऱ्यो भने हामीले चाहिँ 95% अफ सच लेबर माइग्रेन्ट्स आर डोमिनेटेड बाई मेल। विभिन्न पोलिसीको कुराले गर्दा होला अथवा जेन्डर डाइमेन्सन अफ सोसाइटीले गर्दा होला, तर नेपालको लेबर माइग्रेसन इज हेभिली डोमिनेटेड बाई मेल। अनि सोसियल साइन्स बाले 2017मा एउटा रिसर्च गरेको थियो इन सम फ्यु सेलेक्टेड डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स। अनि त्यहाँ चाहिँ के भेटायो भन्नाले चाहिँ 1/3 of married women could say husband say they've gone out for labor migration. So that's a huge population. So we can see the impact that it has been having in the society up there. अनि यो लेबर माइग्रेसनको नेचर चाहिँ कस्तो हुँदो रहेछ भन्नाले चाहिँ इट्स टेम्पररी, मिनिङ द्याट वन्स उहाँहरूको कन्ट्र्याक्ट इज ओभर अथवा उहाँहरूको काम सकेपछि चाहिँ दे कम ब्याक टु नेपाल। सो इट्स नट समथिङ पर्मानेन्ट। अनि अल्सो इट्स इन्डिभिजुअल भन्नाले चाहिँ उहाँहरूको परिवारसँगै जानु नपाउने अनि परिवार पनि उहाँलाई भिजिट नगर्नुपर्ने। सो मैले प्रेजेन्ट गर्ने कुराहरूमा चाहिँ यो कन्टेक्स्ट चाहिँ दिस इज भेरी इम्पोर्टेन्ट। अनि थर्ड चाहिँ हामीले चाहिँ whenever we are talking about labor migration we just think about foreign labor migration, तर खासमा चाहिँ म चाहिँ के पनि एक्नोलेज गर्न चाहन्छु भन्नाले चाहिँ डोमेस्टिक लेबर माइग्रेसन अल्सो एक्जिस्ट वेयर men move from let's say one district to another for labor migration, leaving their wives behind. Okay, give me some time and working on this too. Okay, so moving on to the next slide on the methods. मैले चाहिँ यो पार्टको लागि यो रिसर्चको लागि चाहिँ मैले मिक्स मेथड युज गरेँ। सो मैले अघि भनेको थिएँ मसँग 3टा पेपर छ जुन म गर्छु। सो फर्स्ट पेपर चाहिँ इट्स टोटली क्वालिटेटिभ पेपर अनि क्वालिटेटिभ पिसको लागि चाहिँ मैले 18वटा चाहिँ इन डेप्थ इन्टरभ्यू गरेँ वाइफ अफ माइग्रेन्ट वर्कर्स, अल अफ देम बेस्ड इन चितवन। अनि सँगसँगै मैले 2वटा फोकस ग्रुप डिस्कसन पनि गरेँ विथ रिसर्चर्स अनि साइकोसोसियल काउन्सिलर्स वर्किङ इन दिस फिल्ड फर लाइक मेनी इयर्स। अनि साथसाथै चितवनमा चाहिँ मैले काम गरेको लगभग 9 वर्ष भयो जस्तो लाग्यो। सो 9 वर्षमा मैले चितवनमा काम गरेको अनुभवको आफ्नो एथनोग्राफी पनि मैले मेरो क्वालिटेटिभ एनालाइसिस र फाइन्डिङमा चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ इन्क्लुड गरेँ। So for the quantitative piece, what I did was I used data from Chitwan Valley Family Study or CVFS जुन चाहिँ आइसर नेपाल भन्ने अर्गनाइजेसन चितवनमा इन्स्टिट्युट अफ सोसियल एन्ड इन्भाइरोमेन्टल रिसर्च र युनिभर्सिटी अफ मिशिगनको इन्स्टिट्युट फर सोसियल रिसर्चले चाहिँ गर्नुहुने यो चाहिँ एन्ड इट्स भेरी रिच डेटा सेट। इफ मैले सोचे इफ आइ एम राइट अलमोस्ट 10,712 जना व्यक्तिहरूको चाहिँ एकदम धेरै डेटा छ। अनि त्यही डेटाबाट चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ आफ्नो एउटा प्यानल डेटा सेट बनाएँ। त्यसमा चाहिँ 1,899 म्यारिड वुमेन अनि उहाँहरूको श्रीमानको बारेमा चाहिँ मेन्टल हेल्थ अनि माइग्रेसन अनि इन्डिभिजुअल अनि हाउसहोल्ड लेभल डिटेल्स लिएर चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ यो एनालाइसिस गरेँ। मेरो मेन आउटकम भेरिएबल चाहिँ मेजर डिप्रेसिभ डिसअर्डर or MDD अनि यो MDD चाहिँ हामी चाहिँ सिडी अथवा कम्पोजिट इन्टरनेसनल डायग्नोस्टिक इन्टरभ्यू जुन मैले दिएको छु नेपालमा एडेप्टेड भएको भर्जनमा चाहिँ यो आउटकम भेरिएबल चाहिँ निकालेको थियो। अनि यो सिडी नेपालमा भ्यालिडेट गर्ने टिम चाहिँ डाक्टर दीर्घ घिमिरे जो चाहिँ इफ तपाईँले सम्झिनुहुन्छ भने आई थिङ्क 3 महिना अगाडि चाहिँ वेबिनारमा चाहिँ लाइफ हिस्ट्री क्यालेन्डर सम्बन्धी चाहिँ उहाँले प्रेजेन्टेसन पनि गर्नुभएको थियो। So as for the analysis, मैले चाहिँ hazard analysis use गरेँ। So hazard analysis भन्नाले चाहिँ यो यस्तो टाइपको चाहिँ लङ्गिट्युडनल डेटालाई चाहिँ टाइम टु इभेन्ट अप्रोच लिएर चाहिँ गर्ने चाहिँ एउटा मेथड हो। सो मैले चाहिँ त्यो मेथड चाहिँ युज गरेँ फर माई क्वान्टिटेटिभ पार्ट। यसमा चाहिँ म धेरै डिटेल्समा जान्न, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me later. So first part ma जाउँ है त. So first part, मेरो first research questions, which is kind of exploratory, चाहिँ के थियो भन्नाले चाहिँ what are the pathways of interaction between husband's migration and their wife's mental health? अनि मेरो यो research question दुईवटा hypothesisबाट चाहिँ base भएको थियो. So the first hypothesis is when men migrate, their families experience major life changes. And the second hypothesis was such life changes can influence individuals' mental health through various mechanisms. And what I was trying to find out of this paper was in identifying these mechanisms that influence this relationship between these two variables, husband's migration and mental health of migrant wives. And yes, mental health, I was not very specific to a particular disorder, like I will be next two papers on depression or MDD. As much I was looking more of like psychosocial part or mental health as a part. So this is what I found out. मैले चाहिँ पाँचवटा मेकानिजम्सहरु चाहिँ आइडेन्टिफाई गरे through my qualitative interviews and the focus group discussion. First चाहिँ communication, not only in terms of कतिचोटी फोन गर्यो अथवा कति लामो फोन गर्यो, but also in terms of के को बारेमा कुरा गर्यो, whether talking about just household issues or whether talking about something more फिलिङ्सहरु शेयर गर्ने, आफ्नो स्ट्रेसहरु शेयर गर्ने, यो कुराले चाहिँ एकदम इम्प्याक्ट गर्दो रहेछ यो रिलेसनशिप चाहिँ. अनि सेकेन्ड चाहिँ चिल्ड्रेनको बारेमा, अनि डिपेन्डिङ अन द केसेस दे वर एक्टिङ एज इदर कोपिङ अर स्ट्रेस इन्ड्युसिङ एजेन्ट्स. अनि थर्डमा चाहिँ फ्यामिलीबाट आउने सपोर्ट एज वेल एज डिफिकल्टिज, अनि फ्यामिली चाहिँ बोथ प्यारेन्टल फ्यामिली एज वेल एज हस्बेन्डको फ्यामिलीमा आउने कुराहरू पनि. अनि फोर्थमा चाहिँ माइग्रेसन हिस्ट्री इन द फ्यामिली वाज इक्वली इम्पोर्टेन्ट. सो migration, आफ्नो husbandको migrationको experience say it was something different for those wife जसको family-मा चाहिँ already कोही हुनुहुन्थ्यो, who have already migrated before, versus someone जसको family-मा चाहिँ कोही पनि migrate गर्नु भएको थिएन. So यो कुराले पनि एकदम impact गर्दो रहेछ. अनि अर्को चाहिँ migration as a social process more on a macro level. जस्तै हामीले कति कुराहरू गरेका छौँ, वैदेशिक रोजगारमा धेरैजना जानुहुन्छ. So labor migration right now, it's not something different or something unique. It's something that has already been accepted in a whole social process. So त्यो कुराले पनि इन्फ्लुएन्स गर्दा रहेछ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ आयो मेरो क्वालिटेटिभ इन्टरभ्युजहरुबाट चाहिँ. So to conclude, different mechanisms exist along the migrant wives' individual and social domains through which their husband's migration is associated with their mental health. So मैले देखाएको पाँचवटा mechanisms चाहिँ crosses like individual and then social domains and the borders up there. All right, so यो मेरो first paper अथवा first part भयो. अब second part मा चाहिँ मैले के हेरिरहेको थिएँ भन्नाले चाहिँ predicting the onset of depression among migrant wives with their husband's migration. यो part चाहिँ it was totally a quantitative piece. अनि यो question को लागि पनि as before दुईवटा चाहिँ underlining hypothesis थियो. So the first hypothesis was husband's migration could be a stressful life event उहाँहरुको wife को लागि. And the second hypothesis is that stressful life event is a strong predictor of depression. Right? So यो सम्बन्धी association हुन सक्छ है, association छ है भन्ने चाहिँ hypothesis चाहिँ थियो. अनि मैले husband's migration भन्ने variable भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ I looked at two things. First मा चाहिँ duration away, and यसमा चाहिँ like in the last 5 years how many months they were out for migration. And second कुरा चाहिँ I was looking if they went out for foreign migration versus if they went out for domestic migration. Okay, going to the result. I'm just going to take a short water break. So my first result say what I found out was that my hypothesis was true. In fact, migration of husband is a significant predictor of onset of depression. तपाईहरुले यहाँ स्क्रिनमा म स्क्रोल गरिरहेको छु, राइटमा फिगर देख्न सक्नुहुन्छ. यहाँ चाहिँ मैले hazard ratio को रूपमा चाहिँ मेरो रिजल्ट चाहिँ देखाएको छु. अनि भेरी सिम्पली यो फिगर पढ्नको लागि चाहिँ यो एउटा लाइन छ. यदि यो लाइनको राइटतिर हो भने चाहिँ onset of depression चाहिँ more likely भयो, अनि यदि less than 1 अथवा left hand side ma cha bhane chai less likely भयो. So as you can see, these are very significant. So what I found out was migration of husband is in fact a significant predictor of onset of depression. अनि सेकेन्ड रिजल्ट सेम त्यहीसँग आउने अर्को रिजल्ट चाहिँ के भयो भन्नाले चाहिँ द hazard is not constant and in fact it changes with time. तपाईले यहाँ हेर्नुभयो भने I have divided foreign and domestic migration into two different categories, the first 2 years and then the third, fourth and the fifth year up in here. अनि as you can see पहिला चाहिँ change पहिला चाहिँ एकदम हाई हुँदो रहेछ, जस्तै यो foreign migration को भयो, यो domestic migration को भयो, अनि as I have highlighted up here, migrant wives are highly prone to the onset of depression during the initial period of the husband's migration, which means like the first 2 years of husband's migration. तर later उहाँहरु चाहिँ एडजस्ट भइसक्नु भएपछि, जस्तै हस्बेन्ड बाहिर जानुभयो, उहाँहरुको डिफरेन्ट रोल्सहरु आयो, न्यू एन्भाइरनमेन्ट आयो, त्यो एन्भाइरनमेन्टमा भिजिसक्नु भइसकेपछि चाहिँ के हुँदो रहेछ भन्नाले चाहिँ उहाँहरुको hazard चाहिँ कम हुँदो रहेछ। जस्तो यहाँ देख्नु भइरहेछ, foreign migration को पनि कम भएको छ, domestic migration को पनि कम भएको छ। Though I should acknowledge that domestic migration मा चाहिँ यो relationship, यो association चाहिँ significant छैन, but still the pattern is the same, है। अनि both foreign and domestic migration मा first the hazard increases and then once wife starts to adjust to the new roles, त्यसपछि चाहिँ कम हुँदो रहेछ। So that's the result that I found. So to conclude, it's not just about husband being away. It's more about the stress of adjusting the new roles and environment that increases the hazard of depression. So I think that's one of the big conclusions that I can get from whatever I found from the result that I just presented. So श्रीमान बाहिर गएर मात्रै होइन कि श्रीमान बाहिर गइसकेपछि हुने डिफरेन्ट स्ट्रेसहरु, जेन्डर रोल्सहरु चेन्ज हुन्छ होला, घरमा चाइल्ड केयरको कुरा आउँछ होला, अथवा एल्डरी केयरको कुराहरु आउँछ होला, अथवा घरबाट कहिले बाहिर ननिस्किनु भएको, बाहिर निस्किएर काम गर्नुपर्ने कुराहरुमा आउँछ होला। सो त्यो चेन्जेसले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ that's more significant in the predicting the onset of depression up in here. So to go to the third paper, I hope I'm not going super fast. What I was trying to look at was the role of social ties as protective and risk factor on depression in the context of husband's migration. अनि यसमा मैले social ties भन्नाले चाहिँ के बुझ्छ भन्नाले चाहिँ the network of people and community that you have around you. It could be your friends, your families, or let's say your workplace or any group that you're associated with. For example, यदि कोही क्रिस्चियनहरु हुनुहुन्छ भने चर्च ग्रुपमा, अथवा कोही सामुदायिक वन अथवा कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट्री ग्रुपहरुमा, त्यो कुराहरुलाई चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ सोशल टाइजको रूपमा चाहिँ लिएको छु। एन्ड अगेन यसमा चाहिँ यो हाइपोथेसिस चाहिँ इट कम्स स्ट्रेटली फ्रम माय सेकेन्ड पार्ट अर माय सेकेन्ड पेपर वेयर husband's migration could be an predictive factor for the onset of depression. So on top of that, यो मेरो third paper अथवा third part मा चाहिँ को underlining hypothesis चाहिँ के छ भन्नाले चाहिँ first चाहिँ social ties have the potential to provide social support as well as induce stress, है। अनि हामीले normally social ties गर्दाखेरि interchangeably social support भनेर नि use गर्छ, but we need to be aware that they not only provide social support but also is a source of stress. So यो कुराहरु भनिन्छ। अनि second hypothesis चाहिँ it's more on the context of Nepal. यसमा चाहिँ primary social ties, अनि primary social ties भन्नाले चाहिँ family, children, household members हरु पर्छ। So नेपालको context मा चाहिँ primary social ties could moderate the relationship between stressful life event and onset of depression. So that's what I was looking up in here for this third part of my research. So this is what I found. First thing, मैले के गरे भन्नाले चाहिँ I looked at the direct effects. Just conceptual clarity को लागि direct effect भन्नाले चाहिँ कस्तो भन्नाले without considering the migration variable. So general population, whether you have a migrating husband or whether you don't have a migrating husband, उनीहरुको effect चाहिँ कस्तो रहेछ भन्दाखेरि what I found out up here was that household member for general married woman increases the hazard of depression. जसको मतलब चाहिँ जति धेरै household member भयो, the hazard or the hazard of having the first onset of depression is increasing, है। household member ले त protective होइन risk factor को काम गर्दो रहेछ for general population. तर something interesting happened when I did the interaction effects. Interaction effect भन्नाले चाहिँ what I was doing was I was looking specifically migration को context मा चाहिँ household member ले चाहिँ कस्तो impact गर्दो रहेछ, कस्तो effect गर्दो रहेछ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ मैले चाहिँ हेरे। अनि what I found out was that the role of household member changed. Okay, पहिला चाहिँ risk factor थियो, now it's acting as a protective factor up here. जस्तै अघि मैले भने अनुसार यहाँ high छ, it's above up here. So if you look at the figure here, यहाँ चाहिँ मैले foreign migration like total household member सँग interact गरे, यसमा चाहिँ right hand side मा चाहिँ domestic लाई गरे, and what I found out was that the household members are in fact acting as a protective factor against the onset of depression compared to your general population. So that's what I found up here, which I find is pretty interesting. And the trend was similar for both foreign and domestic migration, though again I should acknowledge that foreign migration go more than 2 years association significance, but again the pattern is going towards decreasing hazard up in here. So to conclude, household members as primary social ties can act as a protective factors to address stressful life event after husband's migration and decrease the risk of depression. So migration ko context ma household member le kasto bhumika khelcha bhanne kura chai yo mero third part bata chai niskyo. So based on that, I made 4 recommendations. The first is that there's a need to focus mental health intervention on migrant wives. So yeah, my second paper, the relation is very significant, right? So there is in fact a relationship between husband being away and then the onset of depression. So this shows that there is a need to focus intervention on this kind of population. On the second part, like straight out of the second paper as well, is intervention, timing is very important. कुन टाइममा इन्टरभेन्सन गर्ने कुरा पनि एकदम इम्पोर्टेन्ट हुँदो रहेछ. हामीले देख्यौँ नि फर्स्टमा चाहिँ हैजर्ड माथि गयो, त्यसपछि तल आयो. सो इट्स भेरी इम्पोर्टेन्ट टु हिट द राइट पिपल एट द राइट टाइम. सो द इन्टरभेन्सन शुड बी फोकस्ड बिफोर or right after husband's migration भन्ने कुरा पनि, that's another recommendation that I have. अनि third recommendation is that the intervention should be focused on dealing with immediate stress. जस्तै मैले conclusion rather than husband being away, it's more about the stress that comes after husband goes away. So interventions should be focused on dealing with those immediate stress, adapting new roles, and then improving the ways of communication up in here as well. And the fourth paper, again, I want to highlight the role of family. So my third part, household members, they act as a protective factor against the onset of depression. So as the intervention, one recommendation would be to include the family members rather than just having the wife of labor migrants within the intervention. There's also a need to come up like a holistic group to include those people up in there. All right. अर्को कुरा चाहिँ यो सबै कुराहरु चाहिँ लाइक ह्यान्ड बाइ ह्यान्ड जानुपर्छ भन्ने चाहिँ रेकमेन्डेसन हो. So I also had some like interesting finding that I really wanted to share, though this is not very specific for migration. So यो चाहिँ कस्तो भन्दा general direct effect जस्तो हो. अनि I thought this would be something really interesting. मैले चाहिँ के पाएँ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ I found the role of education, which is not very surprising, is that the education is a strong protective factor for onset of depression. So मान्छे चाहिँ मैले के गरेको थिएँ भन्दाखेरि मेरो भेरिएबल चाहिँ एसएलसी पास गरेको अथवा एसएलसी पास नगरेको भनेर गरेको थिएँ हैन. सो एसएलसी पास गर्ने म्यारिड वुमेनहरु चाहिँ दे हेभ लेस हैजर्ड. मैले माइग्रेसनको कन्टेक्स्टमा कसरी काम गर्छ भनेर मैले त्यो अझै एनालाइसिस गरेको छैन, बट फर लाइक जेनरल म्यारिड वुमेन एजुकेसन इज अ स्ट्रङ प्रोटेक्टिभ फ्याक्टर विच अगेन इम्प्लाइज द रोल अफ एजुकेसन अगेन्स्ट मेन्टल हेल्थ प्रब्लम्स. अनि सेकेन्ड थिङ विच इज अगेन इम्पोर्टेन्ट इन द कन्टेक्स्ट अफ नेपाल, जहाँ चाहिँ हामीसँग स्पेसली रुरल एरियातिर चाहिँ महिला समूह, मदर्स ग्रुप अनि यो कम्युनिटी फरेस्ट ग्रुपहरू धेरै हुन्छ. उहाँहरूको रोल यो मेम्बरसिप यो ग्रुप्सहरूमा मेम्बरसिपको कुरा पनि एकदम स्ट्रङ हुँदो रहेछ. सो एज यु क्यान सी अप हियर, compared to not having any membership in this group, for someone who have membership in this group are less likely to have the first onset of depression up in here. And the third part is also kind of interesting. So compared to Brahmin and Chetris, Hill Janajatis and Dalits have higher odds or like higher hazard of having depression, which is again not something new or research. But what I found really interesting is compared to the Brahmin Chetris, त्यहाँको रैथानेहरू हुन्छ नि, तराई जनजातिहरू, चौधरी अथवा थारूहरू, उहाँहरूलाई चाहिँ compared to them, they had like less hazard. So I don't know, I think this is something like if someone is looking for a research topic, I think this is something that needs to be really looked at. Genetic factor हो कि अथवा त्यहाँ धेरै जेनेरेसनदेखि बसेको कारणले गर्दाखेरि big social ties भएको कारणले हो कि that's something I'm really interested. So just wanted to throw this out to whoever is interested in working on this as well. All right, so I think that's it. Yeah. All right. So that's the end of my presentation. I know, I think alikati lama bhayo होला, but just wanted to acknowledge this, my funding sources who helped me in doing this, and then also my collaborators, the Institute of Social and Environmental Research, ICER Nepal, TPU Nepal, and the Institute of Social Research at the University of Michigan. Yeah, so that's it, but I think I have one more slide to share. So this is something I really wanted to share. So Chiton Valley Family Study, CVFS, is a very, very rich data set, and especially about emerging researchers, students, it's very detailed. So, and I think यसको धेरै युज भएको छ, but I think it needs to be used more, especially people who are Nepali, जसले नेपालको कन्टेक्स्ट राम्रोसँग बुझेको छ, नेपालमा काम गरिरहेछ, they need to use these resources more. So मैले यहाँ लिङ्क पनि हालेको छु. So I think once your slides are पाउनु भइसकेपछि, I would really encourage you to go and look at this data set, trainingsहरू छ, अनि different ways to use that. So would really, again, like reiterate to look at that data set. That's it. So yeah, I think that's the end of my presentation. So Ritika, so do you want me to stop?
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. That'll be great. I can question answers. Maybe please hold on for a while. If anybody wants to move on to a slide, that would still be beneficial in my second thought.
Oh,
Thank you so much for an extremely interesting presentation. Vanessa. Sujen, over to you for the question answer session.
Okay. अब हामी question answer session मा जाँदैछौँ. हामीसँग we have few questions in the chat box. So I will start with the first question by Tony. So Tony's question is, do you think it ever possible that number of household members could cause additional stress or depression if the wife doesn't feel very attached to them beyond her husband?
That's a very great question, Tony. And then I think it's yes. So I would say yes. And then I think there are other factors, like you mentioned, like how attached the wife feels towards towards the family of their husband, right? I mean, like I hope like you're talking about something, a situation where wife is living with their husband family, right? So obviously, if the attachment is not good or it's not strong enough, I think I would say the same thing as you said, that there might be additional stress and depression, and that would be it. But again, when I started this research, I had this kind of implicit biases, I would say. I don't know if that's a strong word. In Nepali, so those things were coming in my mind. But later, when I started talking with more people and more like wives of migrant workers, I found that it's not only that, the narratives are something different as well. So I couldn't say it, we could generalize that, but I think that's something we can think about as well.
Ritika, I have a question, so it would be considered follow-up question to Tony. So Ritika is curious if the system of love versus arranged marriages, both being usual in Nepal, played any role in the attachment process.
I think that's something we really need to think about, and I'm curious as well, Ritika. I'm not very sure about it. Maybe we need to design or like develop a variable if you have like a love marriage or an arranged marriage. But I could say something like based on my interaction with or my interviews with, I obviously asked this question to, I think, most of my respondents up here. So I would say it was kind of mixed up in there. So yeah, there were cases of arranged marriages, and then just like piggybacking on what Tony was just mentioned up here, there were cases of arranged marriage where you got married and then your husband is there, he's already a migrating labor migrant, and then you come back to your home and then do an arranged marriage, and then, stay together for a couple of weeks, and then shoot, the husband is gone and the wife has to live with the husband's family, who like supposedly not have like enough attachment and up in there. So Ritika, I'm not very sure if I can answer that well, but I think obviously it should be a part as well. And then again, that's another question we could throw out to future researchers of here.
Next question by Minani Guru. So she asks, can you specify which relationship acted as a protective factor, and whether she was living with her at her mighty or her husband's house?
Okay, so that's a great question, actually, especially from a methodological perspective. So the way that I designed, and then I discuss the household member is the number of members living in the household that the migrant wives has been living on that particular month. So remember, this is time series data. So I have data for like every month. So let's say it depends on like where the wife is staying. It could be either at their husband's home, or it could be at their parental home as well. So it's kind of changing up there. So but I can assume that mostly it should be on the in-laws side, because yeah. But again, as I said before, it's a time varying variable. So it could be either on the either side. And then again, like my assumption is it should be more on the in-laws, but I haven't looked at the descriptive analysis of which is more up in there. But that's a very, very important question from again, methodological perspective of here.
We have one more question related to methodology. So Kay Cunningham asks, given the interest in a lot of factors and how they relate to each other, have you ever thought about using causal methods, causal mediation, to be able to estimate direct versus indirect effects for specific factors between your exposure, migration, and outcome depression variables? And I think he or she has a suggestion to use the moderated edition to see.
Yeah, so I haven't done something very specific to the cast and others. I just did very, very general, like I presented in the last slide up there. But I already found some interesting findings on the general population. But I think that's something I would do in the future, and I'm already planning to do that as well. So, but that's a very great comment. Thanks.
And Kripa asks if the proximity to her mightier was something protective for women.
We did not include that variable up in there. So Kripa, if I am understanding you right, you mean like how far your husband home is from your mighty's home, right? If I'm correct. You could just unmute yourself. Yeah, I think that's. Oh yeah, yes. All right. So yeah, we did not look at that, but I think within the CVFS data set that I just talked about, there should be something up in there. I know there are variables that looks at like how far like the hospital or the school is from one household. So I believe there should be a way where we can calculate the distance between your like mighty and your parental home. Sorry, mighty and your husband's home up there. It looks like a lot of ideas flowing in, and then you have a lot of things to work on this data set. Susan, do you want me to just like carry on with the question or?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, I was reading and I was just so question from Bibab Acharya. So he asks, have you had a chance to look at the domestic violence from in-laws? How common it is?
Thanks
And
for
is it
that.
an important
Yeah,
factor
this
for
is
women?
something. Yeah, yeah. Again, like thanks for that. Like I know we talked this about back in DC as well, like last month. So I haven't had a chance to look at this on the domestic violence, but again, I think there is another variable that looks at the incident of domestic violence and the interpersonal violence as well. So again, that's something I would look forward to do up in there. And then since this is a very important factor that like moderates and mediates this relationship, I believe that should be included in further analysis up in there as well. But based on the qualitative interviews that I did, I didn't find anyone saying very explicitly about domestic violence. I know there was one case who said that she moved to her parental home because there was some form of, verbal abuse, not like physical abuse, but some verbal abuse by the in-laws, but nothing up there, but nothing very explicit about, physical violence and all.
Okay, thank you, Sawada, and thank you everyone who asked the questions. So we will now move into the discussion section, where we'll have few questions and we'll break out to rooms and we'll discuss in a group. Over to
Susan,
you.
Susan, if we have time, can I quickly answer Tony's question? Like
Okay,
that's super
yeah,
interesting. So Tony looks like if the advancement in video chat might act as protective factor, that's actually something I'm really interested in, and then I wanted to delve this into further. So it could be like when we think out loud, we can think of it as a protective factor, right? So you have your phone plans, and then you can call your husband and then just do a video chat. But what I found was that it could be different as well. So actually, there were cases where their husband was trying to scrutinize their wife from like far away through those calls. Like I know there were some anecdotes that some of my interviews said that whenever they went out, their husband used to call them and then say like, all right, show me who you are with, where are you, and then that just put up like another form of stress up in there. So I think it could be a protective factor as well, but based on some of the anecdotes that I have, I think it could also be a stress-inducing factor as well. But obviously, we cannot deny that such kind of advancement has just changed the whole context of how people communicate with each other, especially in the context of this kind of labor migration, where like hardly the husband and the wife can visit each other.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Saharda. Thank you so much, group, for such a wonderful discussion. All I want to say is about we will move on to the first things first. If your questions were not answered, feel free to write to us. हामीले यो आजको chat save पनि गर्छौं अनि we'll try and post these questions on Twitter and see what sort of engagement we might get. We look forward to other ways of engagement. So very sorry that we could not get to all the questions. तर the discussion was wonderful. Thank you, Sujan, so much for your moderation. Just want to say, हाम्रो अब चारवटा breakout rooms मा हामी जान्छौं. हरेक breakout room मा हामी एउटा discussion question discuss गर्छौं. हाम्रोमा 8-9 जना मेम्बर्सहरु हुनुहुन्छ र 9 मिनेट पछि चाहिँ तपाईहरुकोमा 30 seconds मात्र बाँकी छ भनेर इन्फर्मेसन आउँछ अनि त्यसपछि breakout room close हुन्छ. I'm opening all the rooms now. तपाईहरु आफू assigned भएको room मा आफू automatically जानुहुन्छ. So have a great discussion, everybody. See you in a while. तपाईहरुलाई इन्भिटेसन दिइराको छ, प्लिज जोइन गरिदिनु होला.
जितेन्द्र जी सुन्नुभएको छ मलाई जितेन्द्र जी कोही त सुन्नुभएको छैन जस्तो छ
हामी कुरा गर्दा गर्दै काट्यो तर आई थिङ्क इट्स द सेम थिङ फर एभ्रीवान
Thank you, everybody. 30 seconds को notification त आयो नि हैन सबलाई घुम्दै 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 कुरा भन्ने चाहिँ जति भए पनि नसकिने त्यो पनि यस्तो इन्ट्रेस्टिङ टपिकमा त्यो पनि त्यस्तो इन्ट्रेस्टिङ प्रेजेन्टेसनको पछि यो त हुँदै भएन हैन वी अलवेज वान्ट मोर टाइम तर अब चाहिँ एकदमै ब्रिफली हाम्रो 4 जना को मोडरेटर्सले प्लिज एक मिनेटमा आफ्नो अगेन भेरी डिफिकल्ट तर 1 मिनेटमा आफ्नो समराइज गरिदिनुस् न है सौहार्द तपाईबाट नै सुरु गरौँ
हुन्छ मेरै कमजोरी हो है मलाई त्यहाँ सोध्नु नभएको क्वेसनहरु सोध्नु भयो मैले त्यो क्वेसनहरुमा धेरै टाइम स्पेन्ड गरे जस्तो लाग्यो तर जस्तो हामीले अब हाम्रो सुजनसँग कुरा गर्दा पनि आई थिंक हाम्रो कुरा चाहिँ लाइक इन्गेजिङ स्टुडेन्ट्सहरु सुजन इज इन्भल्भ इन एकाडेमिया धेरै स्टुडेन्टको छ हैन सो ही कुड इन्करेज समथिङ दैट समथिङ मैले इन्करेज गरेको त्यो गर्नुलाई सो वी टक अबाउट दैट अनि हाम्रो सिजनाजीले पनि भन्नुभयो जस्तै रिक्रुटमेन्ट एजेन्सीजहरुलाई पनि कसरी चाहिँ इन्भल्भ गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने कुराहरु चाहिँ त्यसमा डिस्कस गर्यौं अनि जनै दिदीले चाहिँ नट एक्ज्याक्टली बेस्ड अन डिस्कसन तर चिल्ड्रेनको रोल पनि सोध्नु भएको थियो अनि दैट्स समथिङ आई डिड ह्याड टाइम सो आई थिंक दैट्स इट डोन्ट वान्ट टु ओभरवेस्ट द टाइम
थ्यांक यू सौहार्द विनिताजी तपाईको
ओके अब टाइम वेस्ट नगरिकन म पनि सरले भन्नुभएको कुरामै त्यही रिलेटेड नै छ जस्तो एकाडेमिकमा अरु रिसर्चरको फोकस हुन्छ सजिलो टपिक हुन्छ तर यो चाहिँ जस्तो टपिकहरु यिनीहरु जस्तो एकदम डिफिकल्ट टपिक भएर चाहिँ एकाडेमिकले पनि त्यसरी फोकस दिदैन जस्तो ग्रान्टमा पनि यो कतै इन्क्लुड भएको हुँदैन नि त त्यही भएर हाम्रो डिस्कसनमा चाहिँ जस्तो ग्रान्टहरु पनि इम्पोर्टेन्ट हुन्छ स्टुडेन्टहरुलाई जसरी यो रिलेटेड टपिकमा गएर ग्रान्ट दियो भने चाहिँ अलिकति इन्ट्रेस्ट ड्राइभ गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने र अर्को चाहिँ एडभोकेसी चाहिँ जस्तो मिनिस्ट्री लेभल प्रोभिन्स लेभल अथवा माइग्रेसन वर्करहरुको चाहिँ त्यसमा एडभोकेसी भयो भने चाहिँ अलि धेरै सेन्सिटाइजेसन भएर यो इम्पोर्टेन्ट छ है भनेर एकाडेमिकमा पनि त्यो रिलेटेड टपिक राख्न इन्करेज हुन्छ र स्टुडेन्टलाई पनि ग्रान्ट रिलेटेड भयो भने चाहिँ त्यसमा अलिकति इन्ट्रेस्ट बढ्छ भन्ने नै छ त्यही नै हो सेम नै छ
Great,
Thank
great.
you.
उहाँहरुको क्वेशन चाहिँ थ्यांक यू बिनिताजी उहाँहरुको क्वेशन चाहिँ माइग्रेन्ट वाइफ्स को सिचुएसनमा फर्दर हामीले के कस्तो रिसर्च गर्न सक्छौं एन्करेज इन्ट्रेस्ट कसरी एन्करेज गर्न सक्छौं भन्ने थियो सुजनजी र मेरो क्वेशनमा चाहिँ नि बेसिकली हाम्रो यो मेन्टल हेल्थ र के रे माइग्रेसन र डिप्रेसनकोमा हामी एज प्र्याक्टिसनर के रे मेन्टल हेल्थमा काम गरिरहेको रिसर्चर्स र प्र्याक्टिसनर्स के कस्तो स्ट्र्याटेजिजहरु ल्याउन सक्छौं एड्रेस गर्न भनेर थियो सुजन ओभर टु यू
थ्यांक यू सो हाम्रो ग्रुपमा यो टपिकमा डिस्कस गर्दाखेरि हाम्रो भूमिका के हुन सक्छ भनेर हामी छलफल गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ अझै पनि हाम्रो कम्युनिटीमा मेबी सेन्सिटाइजेसन अवेरनेसको कुराहरू अझै गर्न बाँकी छ मेन्टल हेल्थ र प्रब्लम्सहरू के कस्तो आउन सक्छ भनेर हैन सो यो सेन्सिटाइजेसनको कुरा डिस्टिग्मेटाइजेसनको कुराहरू भयो एकदमै महत्त्वपूर्ण हुन सक्छ र अहिले जति पनि फर्स्ट लाइन अफ ट्रिटमेन्ट अथवा केही प्रब्लम भयो भने प्राइमेरी हेल्थ केयरमा चाहिँ जाने भएको हुनाले चाहिँ त्यस्तो सेन्टर्सबाट चाहिँ उहाँहरूलाई चाहिँ सर्भिस दिने अर्ली आइडेन्टिफिकेसन र इमिडिएट इन्टरभेन्सनको वातावरण मिलाइदिने र जस्तै एफसिएसबीजहरू घरहरूमा जानुहुन्छ होम भिजिटहरू गर्नुहुन्छ हैन त्यो बेला एफसिएसबीजहरूलाई पनि उ गर्ने हैन उहाँहरूको पनि हेल्प लिने त्यस्तो माइग्रेन्ट वाइफ्सहरूलाई यस्तो खालको प्रब्लम हुनसक्छ अनि उहाँहरूले भेट्नुभयो देख्नुभयो भने हामीले पहिला कम्युनिटी इन्फर्मेन्ट डिटेक्सन टुल त्यस्तो पनि सिआइडिटीहरू पनि गरेछौँ हैन सो त्यस्तो खालको टुलहरू पनि युज गर्न हामी सक्छौँ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ आएको छ थ्यांक यू
ग्रेट पोइन्ट्स हाम्रोमा पनि सिमिलर थियो थ्यांक यू सुजन सिमिलर इन द सेन्स कि यहाँ भएको वाइफ्सहरुको लागि काउन्सलिङ साइकोसोशल सपोर्टको कुराहरू हाम्रोमा आइ नै हाल्यो साथसाथै माइग्रेसनलाई नै पनि अलिकति स्ट्रक्चर गर्दै जाने हो कि माइग्रेसनको कुरामा नै रिटर्निङ माइग्रेन्ट्सहरूलाई यहाँ इन्कम जेनेरेटिङ एक्टिभिटिजहरू गर्ने हो कि भनेर अलिकति मेटा लेभलको कुराकानी भयो र साथसाथमा दुईटा एकदमै इम्पोर्टेन्ट आएको पोइन्ट चाहिँ काउन्सलिङ भनेको इन्टरभेन्सन भनेको माइग्रेन्ट भइसकेपछि मात्र हैन माइग्रेन्ट भइसक्नुभन्दा अगाडि उहाँहरूको फ्यामिलीले राखेर एक्सपेक्टेसन्स के हुन्छ के कस्तो केसेसमा कस्तो इन्टरभेन्सन चाहिन्छ भनेर प्रिएम्प्टिभली उहाँहरूसँग काम गर्ने एउटा एकदमै राम्रो पोइन्ट आएको थियो र अर्को एकदमै राम्रो पोइन्ट चाहिँ हामीले यहाँ दोज हु आर लेफ्ट बिहाइन्डको मात्र होइन तर दोज हु गो वहाँ जानेहरूको एक्सपिरियन्सेसले पनि एकदमै डिक्टेट गर्छ how people back here are. यदि त्यहाँ जाने मान्छे frustrated हुनुहुन्छ, undocumented हुनुहुन्छ भने that increases the possibility of people who are left behind, wives or families to also feel unmoored, flustered. So हामीले good proper migration channels हरूबाट पनि migration encourage गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने जस्ता कुराहरू पनि आए. Great discussion. With that, I can see that we're on the dot at 7 o'clock. Thank you everybody. हाम्रो यो एकदमै question answer session एकदमै राम्रो गएको छ, discussion एकदमै राम्रो गएको छ. म फेरि पनि भन्छु तपाईहरुको क्वेशन्सहरु हामीले एड्रेस गर्न नपाएकोहरु चाहिँ hopefully will try and amplify them on Twitter. तपाईहरु पनि प्लिज हाम्रो ग्रुपमा फलो भएर त्यसमा एंगेज गर्नु होला. सौहार्दजीलाई पनि हामी सकेसम्म भएको एंगेजमेन्ट त्यसमा गर्नको लागि भनेर रिक्वेस्ट गर्छौं. Thank you very much Sujan. Thank you very much Binitaji, तपाईहरुको यो एकदमै नै increased role को लागि for such good co-moderation. Thank you. We could not have done this without you. And last but not the least, thank you very much Sauharda. This was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for trying to answer all our questions and being such a good part of all our discussions. Thank you. We look forward to working on this more.
Yes, thanks Ritika. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you everybody. Bye-bye. See you all next month.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.